Let me say one thing to see how much of an echo there. It felt like there was a little echo, but sometimes Google is really good at canceling that out. I don't hear it anymore.
Okay, cool. Okay, cool.
All right. Let's jump in, Guy.
Mhm. Let's do it.
All right. So
See you.
maybe you could introduce yourself so people that don't know you so well that are coming to this through people that I know um, have some idea about what you're up to.
Mhm. See, I think what most people, I think, would probably be most interested in what I do for a living, which is circling. Circling, I found circling with Jerry Candelaria. I think it was back in 1997 or so, and that actually ended up taking off in a bunch of different directions all over the world, and I've spent the last 20 years, for the most part, spending most of my um, my mind and my heart and my spirit diving into discovering both what circling is and developing it. And the where I spend the majority of my time now is training people to lead circles. It's become its own methodology and has a whole set of distinctions. In fact, that's where I met you. And
That's true.
in fact, you just completed the art of circling in Asheville last couple weeks ago, right?
That is true. So I've been part of the training program to learn how to circle with the Circling Institute in Berkeley, with some classes also in Asheville. Um, so something struck me about what you said, Guy. It was unusual,
Mm-hmm.
which is that you both invented circling and you've been spending your time on discovering what it is. And there's like nothing more circling than to say like, I invented this thing and I don't know what it is, and I've been trying to figure it out. What's but it's odd to say that. Like how does that work? How do you do something without knowing what it is?
Well, I don't think I said invented. I think I said I found it.
Okay.
Like so that's the I guess that's the most accurate way to put it. I'm one of the founders of circling with my friend Jerry, and that's like why I like that the most is because it's like literally true. Circling was not anything that Jerry or I or any of the people involved made up, planned on, thought about, considered beforehand. It was something that we just ended up doing spontaneously with a group of our friends, and it really stood out, especially to Jerry and I. And afterwards, we were both like, whatever that was," and we were pointing back to where we had done it. There was just this sense of we didn't know what to call it, but we knew it was something special. And then both of us just like looked each other in the eye and we shook hands, and we just committed to whatever that was. And it took a while to even have a name, and it probably took I don't know, 3 courses to actually really understand that that's the thing that we were doing, which is now what we call circling. So it's like and I think in a lot of respects, that's kind of how really novel things seem to come into the world, right? It's like something emerges, and then you don't quite know what it is, especially if it doesn't have a name or if there's not a word for it, right? It's like I think the Heidegger calls it the being attuned to the nothing, right? He links it to authenticity, but he means that like the no thing. So it's like that's kind of, you could say it's like the noticing the paint, the pattern of the paint on the wall that doesn't quite have a word for it yet. Like something catches your attention and it shines forth and grips your attention. And I think for me, the thing I can take credit for is like letting myself actually be gripped by it, with my, like, letting my interest be really gripped by it. And so it's a paradox, because it's like I say, like, I'm always discovering what it is, right? But that's what it is, though, is discovering what it is, whether it be with the person or with the thing that you're talking about or the thing that's happening right now. There's like a way of attending to and being with something that invites it to come into presence. And I in that way, like circling has been fractal that way, all the way down. You know, on another level, like I know exactly what it is. You know, we have steps for it and we have stages, and all these distinctions have come out of it. But even those are just a sense of a way, those distinctions are a way to orient your perception such that you can look at something and discover it.
Yeah, I've noticed that in the practice of circling, that the words like noticing and attention are very important. And it sounds like what happened with you and Jerry was you were doing circling, and then, and maybe many people have done something similar before, but you noticed it, and you noticed that it seemed like something important or good.
Yeah.
And then you wanted to like distill that.
Yeah, totally.
So when you say you found circling, it's like it was happening, and you found it.
Exactly. Right. So I think it's mostly literally true. It's like I'm one of the founders of circling.
The finders. You're one of the finders of circling.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's been quite a journey. It is quite a journey. You know, it's especially in the sense of, I thought a lot about this, of like, well, why is it that, two dorks, me and Jerry, like they used to call us, like back in the day, they used to call us like the Beavis and Buttheads of transformation, right? We're like, we're two kind of dorky dudes. Like we're both like, he was neurotic as hell, and I have my own version of that, but there's a craziness about all of it. But like, how the hell did those two guys that kind of pointed and committed to this, how did it end up all over the world? That's one of the things that's really intriguing to me, which I think discloses a lot about the world. I think it discloses a lot about circling. I think it discloses a lot about relationships and technology and all kinds of things. But I feel like I'm still kind of discovering what that is too.
So how do you notice the most important thing that's happening? Like, or how do you notice that something important is happening? Like, how do you, like, did you train your attention beforehand? Like, did you have some training in that, or how does one go about being able to notice the most important thing that's happening?
It's a good question. It's funny, like if I take my attention, I put it on my hand, right? At first I just see like the shape of my hand. And then if I were to do the first description, I say, oh, I say it's a white hand or pink hand or something. But if I look at it more, I'll start to notice there's actually like, there is no just white there. There's like tans, and there's purples, and there's blues, and there's umbers. Right. If I can look even deeper, there's like more distinctions in the parts of it, and like the more I look at it, it seems to be that's what attention does. Is attention perceives something and then makes distinctions about what's distinguished. And I think that there's a key component to circling is being attuned to what feels most alive. Right. And like, well, what does that mean exactly? Well, on one level, it means if you just think to yourself, okay, let's just feel into what's most alive right now. We may feel what we consider what's most alive may be really different, but if you feel like where that brings your attention, like, okay, what's most alive right now? It's like, for me, there's a sense of, I feel like I rest back into myself. There's a sense of like where I kind of open my attention, and I listen to how I'm listening to things or what pops into my attention. And I think a lot of it has to do with what is it that is evoking my interest. And I think that interest is a really interesting thing. Like, interest seems to be that affect that is, in many ways, is our connection to the world. But I think one of the things that, like, what you end up noticing is novelty, right? Like, it's the thing that doesn't quite have a word yet. It's the thing that isn't totally resolved. It's the thing that you don't necessarily can predict. It's like there's a sense of there's some part of me listening to what's new or what's novel or what's knocking on the door. And that's just interesting. I think it's something to do with, like, noticing has a lot to do with the unknown in that respect, of like listening to, opening up to what I don't know yet, like, or that I don't know all the way. But it's also, there's a way in which, and I think you probably, like, you can give testimony to this too. It's where it's like when you start to look at what's most alive, sometimes what you actually notice what's most alive is not the thing you want to be most alive.
Yeah, that's true. Especially with something like circling, where we're talking about this practice of, like, this very intentional attention practice. But in circling, you're doing that in relationship with someone, and a lot of times there's this background assumption that it's going to be caring or helpful for the person being circled, and then sometimes what you're noticing is really challenging to talk about. Like, you might notice that you don't believe the person that you're focusing your attention on, or that you really don't like them, or things like that. And so, like, the commitment to like talking about or following what's most alive can be very vulnerable, because I feel vulnerable, like, telling someone that I'm having some sort of negative emotion towards them.
Yeah. And what's happened for you, like, when you followed that, like, when you've shared it, like, what's good about that, or like what's bad about that, or why would you do that?
Yeah, well, when I've done that in the context of circling, and where most of the time there's some relationship building with the people that will be circling ahead of time, it's usually brought us closer together, because there's something I was holding against them that was coming between us that I wasn't talking about. And most of the time when we talk about it, like, if two people can have an honest discussion about something, or if someone can have an honest discussion with me about something that's bothering me about how they're presenting themselves, then a lot of times it does open up that endearment and an affection that I have for them. It gets that thing out of the unspoken thing out of the way.
Yeah.
But I have noticed that I've sort of gone ham on that, and really pushed that a lot. Like, I guess I'm Mr. Negative Emotion in the circling class, and I have noticed that, like, it doesn't always go well. Like, I want to, like, tell people, like, if you talk about something that's bothering you with people in your life, like, most of the time you're going to improve that relationship a lot. But most of the time is not every time. And I'm learning, like, levels of skill, and trying not to like, my goal is to try to make sure I express the thing that's making me dislike the other person, but to do it in the most skillful way possible that doesn't unnecessarily harm our relationship, or that gives us the best chance of improving it. And I don't know how to do that yet. Like, I'm figuring it out.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. That has me think a lot about. Well, it's like, it's that there is, like, an infinite amount of skill that you can gain in being true in a relationship for sure, right? Like, and I think that's probably like a big journey people go on where, like, I've seen it a lot of times where they discover honesty, right? They discover kind of the exhilaration that comes from when you like actually talk about the things that are like going on in your head with somebody else. And there's this kind of fear that you get through, and then there's this kind of release that happens that can be really exhilarating. And then I've just seen people really kind of go to extremes with it, right?
Does that include me?
I don't think so. I don't think that includes you.
Okay.
It's one of the cool things about having a, you know, having a container, right, and a whole class around it is because you can constantly, the container can hold you a bit, so you can just go in there and fumble fuck your way around it, right? That's like one of the reasons why. I think that is one of the things I appreciate about you in the class is that you've actually used the container to push things that are uncomfortable for you, right? But it's interesting because it's like, you know, on one level, you know, this happens a lot in relationships. Like, well, actually, I remember this like early on in my marriage. There was, you know, there were certain things that that were true for me that I wouldn't say because I knew that if I said them, it would just do all the stuff that I didn't want to have happen, right? So I would justify not saying it. But then we, like, the relationship didn't really work, so we'd kind of we'd get like coaching or something like that. And then I'd finally go and I'd risk saying it, right? And I usually said it pretty clumsily, like, and judgmentally, even though I didn't intend to. But because you're scared, it's hard to, like, it's a lot more difficult to own your own experience when you're upset than you can ever imagine, right? Like, and so I would say that thing. And the exact reason why I didn't say it in the first place would usually happen. Right? And like, you can, on one level, you can go, well, see, that's why I didn't say it. Like, because you would say that, and like, right? And you'd get angry, and then we'd be in this whole thing over again. On one level, I could predict that. But because I never said it, right? I never was able to go in the territory of that happening to then have the relationship in it. Right? So, like, you know, I crossed that line. And when I finally crossed that line, yeah, it went into chaos. But now I'm in new territory that my judgments or my criticisms or my upsets, you could say, prevent me from opening up into. So you say that thing and it does turn chaotic, but then it's kind of like sticking with the chaos and being in the relationship and working through that. Then you can start to like actually like get to know that territory. But it is messy first, man.
Yeah, it seems like I like that metaphor of new territory. It's like, to get anywhere, maybe you have to go through that territory to get to the next level if you can, or something.
Yeah.
But it's uncharted land, and the rules are different, and there's storms.
Been enjoying the metaphor of like looking at ourselves like a culture, right? Like a culture is, if you think about culture as like an island, where at the center of the island is the oldest part of the island, and it's also the most structured and the most articulated and the most consistent and stable. And as you move out towards the edge of the island, like at the edge, it becomes less and less stable, like less and less organized. And then right at the edge of the unknown, where at the shore are like all the artists and like the crazy people and the inventors and all the people who have this proclivity, this love affair with the unknown as it first becomes articulated, barely in articulation. And there are people that like are just drawn to that. And if the culture works right, like they'll actually like, that will go into the culture and it will disrupt it, and it'll create debates, and it'll have people have meetings, and there'll be fights, and there'll be these things. But if the culture works right, it'll actually adjust and update the oldest part of it. And pretty soon it'll integrate it and become something healthy. And I think we're kind of the same way. I think human beings are kind of like that. right? Like, you know, if we're not stable enough, right? If we're not grounded enough, right? We can't really tolerate, like, it's too much chaos. We're not cohesive. We can't really have a life. But on the other hand, if we're too structured, right? If we're too rigid, if we're too embedded in our fears and our rigidity and our judgments, like, we also, to the extent that I'm walled up, is to the extent that I'm more easily breakable as well. So there's this constant battle, you know, there's this constant struggle, if you will, to 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 really be grounded and consistent in yourself and know who you are, so that you can actually reach intentionally into what is unknown, or uncharted territory. And I think the key is, and this is why relationships is such a good metaphor for this, right? And what you're talking about is such a good metaphor for this, because there's like the chaos that comes from, like, all the shit that I've been avoiding, and then it just comes up and swallows you up, right? Or there's a tragedy that you weren't expecting. Like, there's a way in which I can actually like, if I'm organized in my life and I'm like taking care of business, I can actually kind of handle a lot of things. Um, but but the chaos that just emerges versus the chaos that you move towards, it's a very different thing. Like,
Yeah, I like that thought, the chaos that you move towards. I have this thought that, like, you mentioned earlier, you used the word like transformational practice, or transformational, and maybe you didn't say industry, but there's like this group of practices that maybe like circling would be in the realm of something that might be called like transformational services if it was listed on some federal tax form. um, but like, people that move towards those kind of things, I think they want something new, and especially like they want to discover new facets of themselves, or new facets of themselves in relationships, and I'm including myself in this umbrella. But I wonder if, like, at some point you get to the point where you're not getting the new that you want out of things like that anymore, and you have to go elsewhere to even, because you need a different kind of new, like a new kind of new, like some meta new.
right. Totally. Totally. Well, what do you mean? Like, what?
Like, don't you think like some kinds of new have the same flavor to them?
Hmm.
Or maybe I just have a very finely developed taste for the new, or overdeveloped taste for the new, where
Yeah.
eventually I start looking for even like new kinds of new things.
Yeah, totally. I think the way I experience it, anyways, is like there's a call on some level. There's something I really want. There's something I really desire, right? And if I look at, like, okay, I want to move towards it. Like, usually, like, moving towards it means giving up something. It means doing something I'm uncomfortable with. It means being challenged in some way, or sacrificing something that I hold dear, right? Like, the it seems to me that, like, a lot of that struggle, what makes it a worthy struggle, right, is because it's worth it, right? There's something worth it. Um,
What was the scariest new ground, uncharted ground that you ever moved towards?
hmm, good question. I think it's like, actually, there was a point when I moved to San Francisco to go to art school. I graduated from the Art Institute in '99. I was a painter and sculptor, and I went to the San Francisco Art Institute, which is, you know, basically as much as medical school practically. And And my second year is when I met Jerry, and that's when we started circling. And so by the time I graduated, right, I had just spent all this money going to art school and like basically positioning myself to be a studio artist, right? And to do the whole artist thing. And there was this period of time where right after I graduated was kind of a crisis for me because I had like basically devoted all this time and money into being an artist, but when I really looked, where I felt most called was with the stuff that was developing and circling. And I remember being really, really divided about that. And there was, and I remember talking with Jerry about it, and he was like, you know, and I remember I was thinking, well, maybe what I'll do is I'll just like go to I'll go to and get my master's in like Jungian psychology or something. Like go see if I can find some middle road where I can kind of take the creative part and the stuff encircling. And Jerry had this really uh, keen observation, as he usually did, was which is like, Guy, look, you know what's going to happen if you go to school. You're not going to want to read any of the books they're going to have you read, right? You're not going to want to like do any of that stuff. Like he's like, look, you're the kind of creature that if you want to go to school, it sounds like you just need to create your school and step into it. And I remember that really striking me. There was something about that felt really true. And that was one part of the equation. And then the other part was like where I realized like that then I'm still going to do art, right? But then I had this really strong sense, and it's these two things of this really strong sense that both are so absorbing. And I knew that I just had this strong intuitive sense that I either needed to choose to do art and do it all the way, right? Or I needed to do circling and do it all the way. But I kind of knew that if I tried to do both, I would do neither. And it was weird for me to actually have that kind of thought. Like it was unlikely to me to have that kind of forethought into it. So it's like it really struck me. And I remember that there was just a moment where I was like, all right. And I consciously took my paints and I felt into like what is it like if I look inside of myself, what do I want? And I wanted kind of both. But like when I felt into the world and like kind of listened to the world, because I think that what we're supposed to be doing isn't just me deciding something, right? In my experience, it's a conversation that I have with reality. And with the people in my life and what the world speaks to me. Because how the hell am I supposed to know what my contribution is just subjectively inside of myself? It seems to be,
Yeah, I kind of think all that stuff out there is part of me too.
yeah, absolutely. And kind of like, and that's how circling worked. I didn't, there was a talent that I had for what was then going to be called circling later on that I didn't even know about. And I didn't even know about it. I didn't even know to look for it. And we started circling. And all of a sudden, I was saying stuff and being ways that people recognized that were valuable in such a way that I could recognize it. And once I could recognize it, then all of a sudden I could see myself that way, which influenced what I saw and did. And like, it was like me finding what my gift was in the world was very much like a living conversation with the world. Um, and so when I kind of looked at it from that lens, and I just listened to the world, and I could feel I could feel the choice to be made, which was doing circling. And I remember that moment. I was like, okay, and I like took my paints and I put them away, and I like took everything away. It was really difficult to do that, and I just was like, all right. And in that moment, I just opened up to what we were doing, and none of it was stable at the time. None of it looked stable, right? But I think it was probably the scariest thing for me. And
And that makes sense to me that it would be scary to because circling sounds like something that at the time was like completely unknown. Like now you've developed it a lot and it feels semi-structured. Uh, but yeah, it does sound scary.
Yeah, there was not much thingness to it.
No. Um, I have a bit of a fear I'm having right now,
Mhm.
which is like I had some thought of trying to like reestablish what I'm calling a bourgeois life after uh, after the events of last year. So last year I went through a breakup in which I also was living with a person. So I lost my housing and I had quit my job right before that. So I didn't have any work. And it was sort of like this life was kind of in shambles and I was really distraught. So the thing to do was I'm like, okay, I need to put some structure into myself. I need to find a new place to live. I need to find a routine. I need to eventually, I started working on a new job recently, so I have like those pillars back in place, and now I'm talking to I'm talking to a woman, and I'm like, well, that could go somewhere. It's like trying to like reestablish the bourgeois life that I lost a year ago, and then some other part of me is like, what I'm really interested in is finding out like what does God want me to do?
Mm,
Like what does God want from me?
mm,
And that's like kind of scary and also like really compelling.
mm.
Um, so like what that would look like would probably be like I don't know, go and finding that out, um, following the leads. But it feels like a big sacrifice because I'm not a young guy to go and like throw a life away and like try to go on some spiritual quest to like find himself. I'm like, well, if I give up what I have now, maybe I'll never have that bourgeois life that I kind of want. Um,
Mhm. So I know what you mean by bourgeois life. What would be the opposite of bourgeois?
um, some sort of like ratty artist that doesn't have any money and is like 40 years old and living with a bunch of other artists in a warehouse and hopping from place to place. Something like something more avant-garde, maybe is the antonym there.
Yeah, got you. So like so you want a life that's like where you have some comfort to it. you can you can pay your rent and you like the place that you live and you have friends and cars and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'd like to have a. I'd, I've been laughing at the phrase permanent address for the last 10 years or 15 years. Like when the government has that phrase on a form, I'm like, you don't understand. Some of us just don't have a permanent address. Like this, it seems like this form wasn't written with me in mind. Um, I'm like, I've been at this place for the last 9 months. Is that permanent enough for you? um,
Right.
and I think a bourgeois life has a permanent address.
Hmm. Got you. Got you. What does it mean for you? I love the question. Like, what does God want from me? Like, it just kind of goes right there. Where does the question lead you?
Um,
It sounds like that there's a fear. There's a fear that if like the answer will lead you to something that will have you sacrifice the whole bourgeois thing.
yeah, and there's a way that I had a really nice life last year,
Hmm.
although I didn't recognize it at the time. And it is the kind of life I'd like to have eventually. And like being so close to it, I'm like, oh, I was like almost there, and I lost it, and it seemed difficult to go through, and I'm getting close to it again. Like that seems like a resting place. And so going off on some to find out what God wants for me, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a resting place. It seems like there's going to be a lot of risk. It's going to see. I imagine I might pursue some sort of career path that would be non-traditional. I might invent some sort of thing, like, or find some sort of thing like you did with circling.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, but the feeling of when I think about what does God want from me, it kind of goes into like the diaphragm or heart area, and it feels kind of tense, and there's this it feels like something wants to happen. It's not entirely a good feeling, it's not entirely a bad feeling. It feels like the the storm is brewing. um
Right.
and I have like images of leaving a lot of the commitments I have right now in ties and going elsewhere.
Huh. Like, do you have a sense of what is elsewhere?
Yeah, I think some contemplative practice. It probably would start at the monastery that I developed a friendship with last year. Um, and also I have some sense that it might have something to do with music. So it would
Mm.
also probably involve going and learning, like immersing myself in learning and producing music instead of futzing around with it in Berkeley, which also reminds me of your story that you were talking about, like not being able to do multiple things. Like you have to kind of commit.
Yeah, totally. As you're talking, you didn't really say this, but as you're talking, I'm getting the sense that it's like we'll say the two questions, like what does the bourgeois want for me, right? And what does God want for me, right? If we look at them like two questions, it seems it seems like it's a very different way of responding to pain. Like pain somehow seems
Mm.
involved with this.
It is. I think that feeling I was talking about in my chest is definitely like the flame of that was often painful. Like that's exactly the area when I had my breakup that was just like tense for weeks. That um, made it feel like I couldn't eat or couldn't sleep. It was like this tension, like right there in that same spot in the chest. Um, and I think, I mean, I'm making meaning of this on the fly, but there's some sense I have that the like one path is like looking for comfort to the pain, like to have a stable relationship with a woman, and a decent life together. Like that would be very comforting, and it would be a salve on it. And the other way, that's the bourgeois way, and then like the what does God want from me way, like that's more of like going into the pain or using it as like a torch or a guide, um, and like not doing anything that would make it go away
Yeah,
because it seems to have an intelligence to it and to follow it as far as it'll go.
yeah, that
Um,
this is the part. Yeah.
and that feels risky. It is risky,
Mhm.
and it also feels like I don't know how many chances I get to have
Mm.
some sort of holy spiritual experience going on in me. Like it's also a big risk to not listen to it,
Right,
to put it away.
right. When you look back at like one of the things that that struck me was you were talking about that I had that life. You said like I had kind of that bourgeois life, but I didn't really realize it. And then I lost it, and then I realized it. What was where was the pain if it was there when you didn't realize that you had the bourgeois life? Like, is was the pain there, or is like the pain that we're talking about the thing that happened as a result of losing it? Like, what's the
Um,
you don't mind me asking?
yeah, I feel like there was some amount of that pain there,
Hmm.
and it might have something to do with like this fear of not using my life well. Um, and there was a way that when I lost it, I sort of had some realization that I was using my life well, and I was building something worthwhile when before it ended. Um,
Mm.
and so there was a sense of tragedy and loss, and
Right.
but I feel like, yeah, that sort of it has something to do with just wanting to know that my life is worthwhile.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And kind of like, because what I'm hearing you say is that you had a life that, like, in retrospect, was worthwhile.
Yeah, but at the time I was worried that it wasn't, and so I
Right.
was always looking elsewhere. I have real grass is greener syndrome. I have historically been king of FOMO, so that is that is my burden to bear.
Yeah, totally. Totally. What's the intelligence in the pain, you think, when you sense into it? That really struck me when you said that. There's an intelligence to it.
Yeah, I think
I want to just, I'm noticing I want to like just sit and, I think some of my questions are actually about just being interested in what it's saying.
so. I have I have some idea, and this is kind of abstract and theological.
Hmm.
So please forgive me, but I have some idea that maybe what feels so good about a woman's love is it's like some dim version of the love of God. And I feel like God loves me when I see myself being loved by a woman because I like she feels like part of it feels like part of that. And I wonder, I have this surmise that if I really followed sort of this holy burning that I have, that uh, maybe I'd find that love of God in a more pure form, and maybe I would just know that I was worthwhile in a more unconditional way,
Right.
like less attached to that external validation from somebody else. Like
Yeah.
there's a suspicion there that's what it's the end, that's what's at the end of that road if I succeed.
Mhm. Right.
Um, I mean, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it seemed to related to an answer to
Right.
your
Well,
question.
let me see if I did, if you, let me see if I got it. It's like what I basically heard you say is that, like, there is a pain that I've been on some level trying to quench or relieve in ways that aren't really directly dealing with it, right? And like, because what I really want is what the pain, the ache is. You have this intuitive sense that the ache is your disconnection from God, right? Like, and so there's various forms that you've been like been looking for that connection, but it's not the real thing. And so there's this kind of sense of like, well, like if I go forward with this kind of bourgeois life, like I did that once and I had it and I didn't even realize that I had it. In fact, I was wondering whether or not it was enough. So it's like it's kind of hard for you to just go, well, I'll just rebuild that and do that again, right? So there's like an inclination of the spirit of the inclination is something like, all right, like let's remove all the let's remove all the forms, right? Like let's get austere. Let's really, really, really like remove all of the fixations and the misunderstandings and the misdirections and the FOMO stuff and the distractions, and then really look right at the pain and follow it all the way to the genuine heart of the matter. And like you're in this, you're finding yourself in this point in your life where it's like, well, I actually kind of have like I could actually go in that direction. I don't have a family right now. Like I'm not like in a big relationship. Like I don't really, I haven't had a permanent address for a while. Like if any time, now would be the time I could actually go to the monastery, so to say, and like really, really like go deep in the pain and remove all the forms and all the grasping and then sit there and really, really get in connection with um and remove the distractions.
Yeah.
That's
That,
basic. Did I hear you right?
yeah, that's kind of it. But there's this fear of doing that too, because I just don't know when I'm gonna have a shot at that bourgeois life again. I mean, it feels like the bourgeois life feels like a resting place. And at some point, I want to rest. I want to rest in a secure confidence that people love me and I'm worthwhile. And I think having a family sounds like a good way to do that. Like if like it's something I don't know that I that's something that's really hard for me to give up, is like this idea that I want to have a family.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm also afraid that if I go on like the spiritual path, that will happen,
Mm-hmm.
that I will give up even that.
Yeah.
Um, and
Mm-hmm.
like I want to be some of me. I don't want to lose all of me. I'm willing to lose some of me to be something better, but I don't want to lose all of me or the most important bits.
Yeah. Totally. Totally. It seems, when I think about it, when I think about like the God route, it seems like what I would imagine one of the things that makes it the God route is that you check all your conditions at the door, right? So if you walk through that door and you really do it, like you give up all of your thoughts of what happens after that. It's like a
Yeah,
surrender. Seems.
yeah, it's pretty scary,
I think
isn't it?
I think it's probably the scary. It's the definition of scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like talking.
Um,
I mean, like walking in consciously directly into the unknown. Like you walk into a monastery or whatever that is, whatever it is that you end up doing. But it's like there is that kind of quality of like what the journey is. You check all futures at the door, even your identity.
yeah, there has to be some amount of trust there. But I think the good news is that I think I can trust that the start of it is good
Hmm.
and like start on the path, and then maybe like I don't think I'm asked to trust the whole process right away.
Hmm. Right. Right. Totally. Totally. Trust. Trust what? Is it a trust that? Is it a trust something? Is it like what do
Mm. It's a trust that despite the randomness of the universe, that if you pursue good, you end up somewhere good.
yeah.
Like there's like some justice in existence, that the world is in some ways good.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And there's not and there's you know it's not objective truth. It's a way of seeing the world, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. That it seems to be like in fact that's what makes it good is that like is that you live as if there's that potential, right? But that's what makes it courageous, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I like being called courageous, so maybe I will go do that.
Hmm. Man.
I like thinking of myself that way.
Hmm.
I am courageous in some things. I am
Hmm.
somewhat courageous.
Yeah,
I'm
totally.
greater than zero courageous.
Right. Well, it seems like this breakup that you had, that you went through. It seemed like you were pretty courageous through that to me. It seemed to me.
I don't know. Why do you think so?
Well, it seemed to me that like you there was a way there were a lot worse ways that you could have been with all that.
A lot better ways too, but
Yeah, always.
but yeah, I can
But I
say
mean,
I'm alive and I didn't do anything irrevocably bad, and I feel like I learned a lot from it and
yeah,
become a better person. Um,
that's what
which
I
is
mean. You did that had you become a better person. Those things. Because I
mm,
know it's like, I mean, we had some conversations. I've seen you in some places where it's like you had some pretty dark feelings going on, to say the least. And my experience was like it looked like to me that you were making conscious choices to move into it, right? Um, where you could have moved out of it or turned it on something. But like I saw a bunch of times, my impression was that you looked it in the eyes and you you chose the good thing.
there's definitely this feeling that I have where and it might be the definition of trauma, but there's like some way that I just want to live my life so that that never happens again. And so some of that is like learning as much as I can from it and being a better person. Um, but also I have the sense that in order to be the best possible kind of person, I have to put myself in the kind of situations where I risk that that could happen again.
Yeah.
And
I feel about that.
that's really scary.
Yeah.
And and I think like trusting that we're doing the right thing, even if it's scary, is like is what I have to do if I want to have a good life. I think.
Totally. If you let's just say that it worked, right? Let's just say that you learned what you needed to do, like you surrendered to God, right? Whatever that means to you. And you did it fully, right? And you went back into the bourgeois life and you created a bourgeois life, but you surrendered. You did the whole thing fully. How would you know you did?
Hmm.
What would tell you that? What would be what would be new? What would be different? What would be more or less of something?
I think that I would be. I think I would be living a life where I could stay connected to God, um, even in all aspects of it. Like when I'm with my family, when I'm in my career, um, and like right now, there's like clearly like some parts of my life that where I feel like I'm living into my best self and being connected to God, and then other times where I get really off balance and I feel very distant from God. And so I think like living if I really surrendered, there'd be some way that I'd probably go through like some other period of wandering and chaos, and but out the other side I would find like some stability where I never felt like I was sacrificing my truest nature or my potential or what am supposed to be doing in order to get by because I'm afraid. Instead, I would feel like I was staying connected to that throughout
Yeah.
every aspect of my life.
There's something like the most essential is like is it fair to say the most essential important thing you lived without that ever being at stake in the matter.
Hmm.
There was an
Yes.
unconditional connection to it.
Yeah, and it might be theoretically conditional. Like if I started betraying it, it could go away again.
Yeah.
But I would have a life where I never would be forced. I would never feel
Hmm.
um, outside and internal factors would never conspire to make me betray it.
Yeah. That seems that seems like a worthy aim to me. Hmm.
And the risk is that you know I
Seems like
don't get there, but I lose
yeah,
another shot at like a pretty good bourgeois life with good things in it.
yeah. And it sounds like the idea that like there's something in for like you don't want to miss it again.
Don't want to miss what?
Like like what I heard you say is like when you had the bourgeois life before, you kind of missed it.
Well, I love that we were talking about like attention
Hmm.
earlier in this. Like, there's a way that like how do you know how do you know what to bring your attention to? Like, I didn't recognize that what my life was good. I didn't recognize that because I had some idea that it could be better or should be better.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah,
And I got rid of the wrong things. I made the wrong sacrifices.
yeah.
Like I pushed away a really solid, great relationship that many people will never have a relationship that good because I dreamed of something better. Um, but that
Mhm.
wasn't it wasn't the right sacrifice to make. There was certainly ways my life could have been better. It wasn't perfect, but I went. My attention wasn't on the right thing. When I
Yeah.
was thinking like how to make this better, my
Mhm.
attention wasn't on the right thing.
Right.
And so like how do you know where to put your attention?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's like, do you feel like you know that some more?
Yeah.
Like whatever it is that has your attention, know that like when you look back and you reappraise your past, like, oh, I made the wrong sacrifices, right? I sacrificed the good, right, for the bad, right? And
Hmm.
like, I didn't know that I was doing that. I don't know if you did. I don't know if you did. It sounds like you didn't know, or you didn't know to what extent you were.
Yeah, at the time I didn't, but if I was doing the same thing again, I would know.
Yeah. Okay, right there. Hmm.
I have a better compass
Yeah,
toward,
totally. Yeah,
towards the good.
you have more distinction now.
Yeah.
Uh huh. You have a different map of the territory. Yeah, totally. So that right there, like I was just wondering about like so like let's just say that like you went back you got into a relationship like this person that you're talking to now, let's just say it developed into something and you got a permanent address and you guys like you got a job that you enjoyed and like it all started to unfold and you started to have it again. One, I bet it's not you wouldn't have it again. Doesn't sound like it'd
Yeah,
be the same thing, right?
for sure.
Like how would it be different? Like that your body responded really.
It's yeah, I mean there's just like one of like the really tragedy like heart touching things like when I was going through that was just like this idea like that it was a unique thing
Yeah.
and that I can be with somebody else, I can build a new life, but I'll never have back that thing that I treasured and cherished. Even if by some chance I was back with the same person, um, like we had such a disruption that what happened, like I'm not the same person anymore.
Yeah.
So that, and I wouldn't want that back anyways because that was something that was that died.
Yeah.
Um, so
Totally.
so there's just like it just touches me that like I'm very aware of the impermanence of the world now in a way that I wasn't before. So, yeah, everything's new. The next time around, if I'm lucky enough to have that, it'll be new. It'll be different.
Well, it sounds like that there's wisdom there now.
Yeah, I've seen a few things, you know.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're. Is it Peterson? Is it Peter that says that like wisdom is knowing what to be terrified of, or being terrified of the right thing. Like I'm hearing like it's possible to do that again, and you seem sufficiently terrified of it.
I I don't know if I'm terrified of the right things, but I'm definitely terrified of not noticing of not noticing how good I have it, and then doing things to muck it up, um,
Right.
like that. And I've like stopped taking a lot of my desires that seem a little bit more FOMO-y or juvenile. I stopped taking those as seriously, and I feel like a more serious person, that can make choices and trade-offs.
Yeah.
So,
Is it fair to say like do you feel like more of a trustable person to yourself?
oh yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. So it sounds like one of the things that your attention is on like is what's most alive for you, right? Is noticing what's here, right? And like recognizing the transientness of it and like it's to some degree the arbitrariness of it. So whatever is good is here. It's like something worthy of being grateful for and
yeah,
savoring. And you're also noticing, it sounds like what grabs your attention is noticing like FOMO desires, FOMO fixations. Like I would imagine there's like a for me those kinds of things have this there's like almost like there's content to it, right? But there's a drive or a drivenness that like if you tune into it, it just doesn't feel good. Like there's something driven about it or something has to happen or there's something controlling about it, right? There's a some kind of suffering around it.
there's something about like I've always wanted to walk down every road at once, and you can only pick one. Um, it's like maybe a related personality trait. Maybe it's not quite the thing, but um, it's like how can I be with this woman because she doesn't like these things? I should hold out for someone that likes these things, and but if I accidentally wind up in a relationship with her, I should resent her for it. Um, like that kind of thought pattern is sort of like this FOMO-y thought pattern where you can't give anything up.
Yeah.
Um, and like there's a way that if I notice myself holding back from something or someone good because of it seems like I'm holding out for some better fantasy. Um, I'm kind of speaking into a cat now. Um, he needs to be fed, uh, but I'll finish my thought and then I'll go feed him.
Yeah.
It'll just take a second.
Yeah.
Um,
That's cute.
but yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell when it's FOMO and when it's like a real like. I also fear I'm missing out on like serving God, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a fear there that I mean, but that seems good. But I guess there's like a fear of also missing out on things that seems like more like less good for me or not a high enough calling to really fear that for. I'm trying to
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah.
Um, I'm gonna go take this guy and feed him for a second.
I'm gonna go to the bathroom.
All right.
I'll meet here in a second.
Hey, stream, hold out. We'll be right back in a minute. 30 seconds. That's the downside of having a chamomile cast. You almost always need a bathroom break, about once per hour. We'll probably go for about 13 more minutes, or that'll be an hour and a half, maybe 20 for everybody listening. And I'm just re-upping my chamomile right now. And then we'll be right back. I took the liberty of pouring some more hot water into my chamomile.
Right on.
So that was like a perfect size break for me. Guy, I don't want to keep you all night. Let's go another, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes and then call it a night.
Sweet.
So were we just circling?
Were we circling? I guess some of that actually probably was circling. What do you think?
I think so. I think we were following what was alive. You were like following your curiosity and what seemed to be most alive for me. Was that what was most alive for you?
Yeah. Like it was like a couple of things of well, one I was curious about what it was that, like, this dichotomy that you're, that just struck me. And I think, yeah, and I just kind of followed my interest there with that. Like, and I could feel your sincerity. And there's a way I've been tracking your life too, right? Like I care about you and been seeing you. And so there's like a living that's a lot, like you're, I care about you and that care is just alive with you. So I just want to know. And it's also that that thing that you're talking about of you're at a point where you're going to be making some pretty big decisions. Like, and how do you know like where to aim? And like there's something about that getting clear on that level is just like, as I listen to you getting clear about it, like it's almost like I go on the ride with you on some level. I think it's one of the things that's kind of cool about circling is that, even if you're not the one being circled, right? Even if you're just kind of participating, maybe more of an observer or something, you're not just passively observing. You're watching somebody go through the genuine drama of their life, right? Because usually, like, when you look at what's most alive is usually going to be something like this. Like, what's the most important? Well, whatever's important, I usually have to make a decision. I can go left or I can go right. Or maybe I don't even know how to conceptualize it, and so I have to conceptualize it correctly and like know where I am, right? So then I know where I want to go. And so there's something about the place that you are in your life that was just, I think, salient, probably for everybody who was watching, right? Like,
I hope so. But yeah, I find that in circling too. It's something that I appreciated about counseling before when I did a counseling practice, and now I appreciate about circling. It's like people are sort of inherently, or people are often very interesting, and like their struggles are very relevant to mine. And there's something like, if you're not a professional counselor and you don't do intentional relating stuff, then I think I would feel like I was just missing out on all this data. Like I've just seen a lot more windows into other people's lives, and on some level, it's just really entertaining. Like talking to you about what's going on in your life as a is that as exciting as a Hollywood TV show, maybe more so, and nobody else gets to see it. Like it's this tiny indie production that will only be on stage for 30 minutes on a Thursday, and then it'll be gone. But it's also like just really, I think it builds some better sense of how to navigate, to actually hear from other people
Yeah.
about how they're navigating.
Right.
Like I feel like I'm accelerating my growth process to some extent by learning from other people's lives and getting some sense of like a wider sense of what it's like to be here.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Totally. It's like what it's it's what is interesting, right? Like I think it's also there's this element where, like the I think it's is it Gregory Bateson talks about the difference between like a blockbuster movie and like an artful movie, and there's this way in which when you go to like watch a classically entertaining movie like a blockbuster, right? You walk in one way, you sit down, right? And then the movie opens, and then the plot gets set, and then there's the good guys and the bad guys, and then there's this kind of rising tension and the edge, and then there's this kind of climax, right? And then there's resolution, and then it completes, and then the credits go down, right? And then you walk out exactly the same person as you walked in on, right? But like the more artful a movie is, right? Like you walk in one way, and a plot opens and a drama unfolds and the tensions happens and the complexities. And the more artful it is, the more, you could say, the more incomplete it leaves you, right? And so you walk in and you walk out in some semblance on a very high level incomplete. And that's how it can be transformative, because it's like you on some level, especially if it's a very moving or impactful film that like touch on really deep themes, like it will register, you'll like be able to pay attention to it because it mirrors some deep structure in you, right? And so you walk out and you complete it with your life, you work it out with your life. And I think that there's a way of like where, drawn into that dichotomy that you were talking about, like on some level, like how did I know to be interested in that? Like what grabbed my attention around that? Like it's like, there's like there's this way in where I could just relate so much to that experience. And I'm struck for myself of like how some of the choices I've made like in my life lately have been things that I've chosen to do, things that like 2 years ago would have looked like choosing to go to prison, right? But now they're like things that are actually like I'm touching in on a level of like love and freedom, and that I'm really quite surprised by, like feel humbled by, like so really like kind of stepping into a relationship, and I'm getting married in December, and
Well,
you know
congratulations! I didn't know that you had a date set.
yeah, totally, and we want to have kids together, and like I've ended up married before, basically. I've ended up, right, a parent before, but like doing this really, really consciously and intentionally is a real different thing. And it was a ride coming to that decision. Like, and I really appreciate Brienne and her patience with my slow with my, I always feel like that she gets it like way ahead of me. And like she's
I feel like it takes a woman that's very not too insecure to like give you time to figure things out.
yeah, Yeah. She's giving me a lot of time.
Hmm.
But
What what for? Oh, go for it.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I keep feeling impressed with how I keep learning what love is. Like, and I also, in learning what love is, I also learn what I also unlearn what I thought love was, right? Like, and it's so much more. I think the thing I'm appreciating about it is like it really, really isn't a knowing how to do something, right? Or a knowing where to go or something. It's more like a place you sit. Like, and when I started to sit in that place and watched it unfold, like I didn't know exactly what happened, but I could tell when I wasn't in that place and I didn't know how to get back to it. And then I would go back into it. And it was this kind of experience of just, oh, there was some kind of place that I sat in my being where where I could feel myself really loving her all the way, right? Nothing held back. Um, and it was like, and at some point, it started to stabilize. Like, and now there's this kind of element, and we talk about this a lot, but there's this element where I just feel like I know exactly where to sit. And it's like way more upstream than I thought. Like the relationship is like it wasn't even in the place I was thinking it was in. I used to think like the relationship was way downstream, but I'm realizing it's like the relationship is way upstream, and I feel really humbled by my relationship with Brienne and by her, and I'm grateful.
It feels like a really important thing to learn is to learn what love is.
Hmm. Yeah,
Do you think you'll that there's another layer to it that you'll ever learn
I have to say, man,
more perfectly what love is?
like I have to say, man, I would be surprised if I like one thing I feel like I've learned is like there's more to learn with it. you know, I I'm just impressed with the choices that like I'm making, and because I literally like looking at where we're going. I really looked at. I would have one. I wouldn't have even predicted it. Like two, I couldn't have imagined I even would have wanted it.
You were saying 2 years ago, like there's no way you would have been able to make the choices that you're making now to get
Yeah,
married and
totally,
have children.
totally. And there's this kind of there's a way. There's kind of a way in which I'm really just also just appreciating pair bonding, man. Like I think that like all the attachment research that they're doing, I think it's just really I'm just appreciating it. There's really something deeply to it seems to being human and being deep like having one place in the universe that like where there's no doubt. Like that may be something that you don't outgrow, but you grow to learn to have it more and more deeply. Like I think I've just been humbled and I feel humbled and just deeply appreciative of understanding that. And I just didn't have a whole lot of experience of that like growing up. So I didn't even like I don't know if I saw much example of that, but it's so interesting that even though I don't think I've ever quite experienced it, it's so interesting on how much it feels like I'm recognizing something that feels familiar that I've never experienced. It's really interesting. So I just appreciate too. It's like when you're talking about like how like you're in this relationship and you had this life and you somehow missed it, right? Like I actually get what you're talking about, like on some level. I think it's more, it's surprisingly, um, like I, I feel more than capable of doing that. Like it's really like it's not obvious what the most meaningful thing is, right? It's not obvious, especially if you don't have any like examples in your life of people doing that. There's some people that grow up in that kind of environment, and then just imagine, I would imagine that they're just oriented that way. And they probably don't even think about it, right? But like, if you haven't had that, it's so easy to, well, looking for the good, right? Looking for what's most valuable seems to be just human. But like, there's nothing obvious about that urge that tells you what the right thing is. And so, but I think it is like, in circling, in a certain sense, I think it is a practice, and on a certain level of knowing where to bring your attention to the most real thing. And there's always a risk involved in that. There's no guarantee with that. But the act of doing it, the act of attempting to do it, I think is really wholesome. And I just keep seeing how that's playing out in my life at deeper and deeper levels. Like, I keep, feels like I'm realizing it.
Yeah, there's two things I want to say. One is I think it's really impressive that you have gotten to a point where you are saying yes to a commitment with, it sounds like, no hesitation, like knowing completely that this is what you want to do.
Yeah.
That's something that I hear a lot of people struggling with, like friends of mine that have been in long relationships, or like younger people today. I feel like they can't comprehend what it would be like, or how anyone could ever get married, because you'll always have doubts,
Yeah.
or and they can't imagine what it would be like to make a decision make that big of a decision without reservations.
Yeah.
Which is why some people
Mm.
date for 13 years and
Mm.
don't get married, and are still on the fence about it. And so it's interesting to me, and I think impressive is one word, but it seems like it's taken a real journey to figure out how to do that. And
Yeah.
it's not so simple, and it's probably, I don't think it's something that everybody gets to. Like, I think
Yeah.
even people that like end up having good marriages, that they're really grateful for, a lot of them, I think, get into it being like 80% sure it's a good idea, or 90% sure it's a good idea, and they say I do, and then like part of them's like, holy shit.
Yeah.
And like the ability to like walk into something with your full agency is I think kind of a rare and cool gift to have in your life.
Yeah. Totally. Totally. There's something about, like, and I have to say that I don't know if I've, like, it doesn't feel like there was a target and I hit the right target. It's more like, it's more like I knew where my love was flowing, and I trusted that. And I didn't make any decisions based out of certainty by any stretch of the imagination. But one of the things I found is, in making the choice, the act of choosing, in some level, like, made it a good choice, right? And I think there's two participants in this as well. Like, she's amazing, and so there's something there. I don't know if I can articulate it quite. I'm still trying to articulate exactly what's going on with me. It's still, like, a lot of it's just really, really new and fresh.
Yeah, there's that makes sense to me,
Mhm. Yeah.
that like making the choice made it a good choice.
Yeah.
I had this intuition when I was waffling on my last relationship that if I if I married her or if I broke up with her, like either way would have been good.
Mhm.
Um, but it was like the waffling that was bad.
Yeah. Kind of being decisive in your own heart.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jonathan says, "Hey, Jonathan Dubin,
Mhm.
in the chat." So,
Hey, Jonathan.
hey, Jonathan. We haven't gotten very many chats, so I just thought I'd acknowledge that one.
Right on. Right on.
And then the second thing that stood out to me about what you said is you used the word wholesome.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I like that word a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
Like there's something. I mean, circling's weird,
Mm-hmm.
and I think all transformational practices are.
Weird. Yeah.
Um, like it's unusual to interact in that way.
Yeah.
Um, but I want one to be wholesome, and I certainly think circling is the most wholesome.
Mm.
And I think there is something wholesome about just giving someone, like, really putting your attention on someone
Yeah.
and like really bringing your interest to them in the non-judgmental but also non-fake way of circling.
Yeah.
Like there's something wholesome
Mm.
about that, maybe, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I always say it's like with circling is still weird, but it's a little less weird than a lot of weird things like this, right? Because it is focusing on, it's one of the rare things that actually just focuses on the fundamental unit of relationship that underlies all other relationships, like the basic sinking in with another human being. And I think it's like it's the place, relationships are the places where it's like when I look at the places where I've been the most hurt and fucked up, right? Have been in relationships, right, that have negatively impacted my life, and then I look at all the places where I feel that the things that have most enlightened me and enlivened me and nurtured me, they've been relationships. So whatever it is, that space seems to be really powerful. So it's like if you can find a place to sit in that space that gives you some more say so of whether or not it goes left or right, that just seems like so fundamental to life. And I think that's why the word wholesome really fits, right? Because like what's more ordinary, what's more primary to human beings? Our whole nervous system is oriented towards like inner subjectivity, like the whole fucking thing, right? Like I only know I'm me because someone responded to me in such a way that I was able to like take on the conception of them that they had of me and go, oh, maybe that's me. And I think that's always happening on some level. Um, so it's like if we can become comfortable in the ambiguity that is a conversation and is relationships, and we can kind of find the places, like it's like it's not. Here's the other part of it is like there's no guarantee in a relationship, right? There's no guarantee in relating. It's like not the nature where guarantees happen, right? So it's not like it's going to turn out if you do X, Y, and Z. It's more like the way that you do yoga with your body. Like you do these postures and you do all these kind of extreme stretches in these positions that on some level like kind of mirror like aspects of like your body and space and life, and you just hold these postures not so that you get good at the postures, right, but so that when you're walking around in your life, when you're not thinking about yoga, your baseline's just a lot more open, right? And I think circling is something similar. When you look at it as like a practice, it's like you can say that what are the basic asanas, right? Or attitudes and places that you sit that when you've had profound conversations and interactions that have been really, really good and moving, if you were to kind of find the basic bedrock, relational asanas, if you will, circling is kind of like just going into those asanas and extremely going into those postures, right? So that like when you're up and you're just talking to your boss, your baseline is just a lot more, you're rooted in a lot more wholesome place to listen, to respond, to like tell the truth, to risk, right? Because if we improve our relationships, if we improve our connections with people, if we can have deeper conversations that matter to us, those are all the things that open up all the doors for all of us. So in that sense, I think it is really, really deeply wholesome.
I'm thinking of things to say. I'm kind of not thinking of things to say.
Mm-hmm.
But I notice you look kind of soft right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
felt like maybe the previous topic was heart opening. Is that a
Yeah.
word?
Yeah. Totally. It's totally heart opening and humbling,
Mm, mm.
moving, grateful. Yeah. And definitely. Yeah. I'm in love with her.
You are, I would say, a lucky man, but like luck had something to do with it, but not all.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hmm. Is there anything else we wanted to cover before we complete?
I can't think. I think I'm kind of feeling like we're coming towards an ending here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, thank you for being a good show host there, Guy, and asking the correct question that was kind of on my mind.
You're welcome.
Reading it.
Right. You're
Um,
welcome.
no, I think this is a good place to kind of wrap things up.
Mhm.
I don't know what time zone it is over there where you are, but you know, probably we need to be getting to bed.
Yeah. It's bedtime for me.
Yeah, me too. Well, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah. Good talking with you, my friend.
Good talking with you too.
Do it again.
All right.
Oh.
Peace.